Hello and welcome back to another episode of the St. Louis Parish Podcast. My name is Andrew Lane, the Director of Communications here at St. Louis, and I'm joined by Deacon Alfredo. Deacon, good to have you on today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Deacon, I know myself and St. Louis, we do have some experience with you. You've been here in some different capacities in the past, but I don't know too much about you.
Right.
So I'm here to uncover, maybe dig a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you could maybe shine some light, what is the Deacon Alfredo life story?
Yeah. No, so it's funny you mentioned that because what happens at the seminary is that once you enter the seminary, they almost place you as far away from your home parish as possible. So it's on purpose. Once you've spent some time at a particular parish, your home parish, the intent is for you to get to know other parishes across the diocese. So I haven't really come back to St. Louis for an extended period of time in years. So it explains why we don't know each other too well. But yeah, this is my home parish. And it has been, for the better part of at least 8 years, I want to say. But even before that, maybe we can just start with my childhood, I guess is what you might be interested in. I'm not from Virginia. I'm from Peru. I was born and raised in Peru until the age of about 10. I just come from a very modest background up in the northern corner of Lima. That's where I'm from. And, in the late 80s and early 90s, Peru was just really struggling financially. There was a lot of need for work. And so a lot of people decided to leave. It's just kind of a common phenomena that we see across Latin America, unfortunately. And so by winning the visa lottery, my family was able to come to the U.S. And we arrived in Paterson, New Jersey, which is sounds kind of random, like why go to Paterson, New Jersey? Well, Paterson, especially at the time, had the largest colony of Peruvians in the country. So it was just a natural magnet for us to assimilate ourselves to the nation. Why was it the largest colony of Peruvians? I have no idea. Probably just because easier to find work, especially factory work. Sure. My parents did that when we first arrived. I was 10. My sister was, I think, around 7. That's when our life here in the U.S. began. And we didn't know anybody. We really knew, especially me and my sister, like we had never been here before. We just knew each other. When we went to school, it's just kind of awkward, right? Like just not only is it awkward to start a new school, but in a new language, a new world. That's a whole story on its own. It's really the transition period. Challenging, of course, you can imagine, but so rewarding at the same time because the fruits of my parents' labor really paid off quickly, I would say, especially when it comes to my sister and I being well educated. My mom was adamant about not sending us to public school. Public schools up in northern New Jersey are notoriously bad, especially at the time. Yeah. And so she desperately wanted to avoid those. And she sent us to the nearest Catholic school, which, praise God, was a very good Salesian school, Salesians of Don Bosco. It was St. Anthony of Padua in Paterson. And so my sister and I began our education there, also our catechesis. And then later on, we both went to Salesian high schools as well. I went to the all-boys high school, which is Don Bosco Tech. And my sister went to Mary Help of Christians, which is all girls. Our Catholic education really took off when we arrived in New Jersey. And praise God, it was a really good foundation, especially for me when I went to college, to really continue to foster my faith, my prayer life, and to grow in that. So I guess I can then transition over to college. I realized very quickly that I was good at math and science. It was just kind of an interest. Yeah. I really enjoyed math and science. And so I decided, let me give this a shot and let me find a career that has a good salary. That was the goal.
Sure.
And so engineering was always at the top of the list. Like, just become an engineer and you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to take care of yourself, your family members. And for me, as a firstborn male in, from a Peruvian family, of an immigrant family especially, there is definitely that sense, that even urgency or obligation to take care of my parents, to take care of my family. As they grow older, they're going to rely on me. They're going to move into my home. They're going to, I'm going to care for them, provide for them, in whatever capacity I can. It's a different mentality, right, from what we have here in the U.S. And so I took that on, especially because my own parents were doing that for their parents. And so I took it on as my own obligation, my own responsibility.
So your grandparents are in the States at this point now?
They have been at various times, not currently.
Okay. But in Peru, your grandparents were living with?
Yes, they were living with my aunts and uncles, and they've even come to the U.S. and stayed with us.
Gotcha.
But even if it's not directly living with them, it's always like providing somehow for their medical care
support,
or some kind of support, right? It's just there's just that very cultural intimacy, right? That's very intra-generational.
Yeah.
So, right. And so I just wanted to participate in that. I mean, what a noble and good thing to do, right? But it came at the cost of foregoing what could have sparked a vocation back in high school, right? Because the interest, I think, was there. The interest of the church, of the faith, especially the Mass. I was an altar server. I would come to Mass and serve, and I always found it interesting, curious, but always thought, not for me. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to be able to do what I want, and
right.
Which were good things to provide for my family, among them. So, I went off. I went to Notre Dame, to the University of Notre Dame, a good school. Made very good, close friends who I'm still in touch with today. Maintained and grew in my prayer life. It was very easy at Notre Dame to do that. Every dorm has a chapel, has Mass every Sunday, and then a few times, if not every day during the week, confession, and then the priest in-house. It's just great, right?
Yeah.
I went to graduate school after that. And for the first time, I had to seek a church because it had always been around me. Once I had arrived in the U.S., in New Jersey, at Notre Dame, the church was there. For the first time after college, in grad school, I had to seek a community of faith.
Interesting.
And it was then that, even though my faith had been, growing, it was really after college, at grad school, where it took off. I found a good Dominican parish with, I don't want to call it a Newman Center because they wouldn't call it that, but it basically acted like one.
Okay.
Where young adults were very active, very curious about their faith. And it was an excellent blend of faith and reason, which for me as an engineer, which is what I, was aspiring to, just made so much harmony for me, right? Faith and reason. Let's blend the two together.
Yeah.
Yes, please. And so that was wonderful. And ended up getting a master's in mechanical engineering and then a doctorate in mechanical engineering.
Wow.
With an expertise in laser diagnostics, if that means anything.
It doesn't, but I'm still impressed.
Well, it's funny because every now and then I'll run into someone who really knows a lot about laser diagnostics. Just a couple of days ago at St. James, we had an event, an adult faith formation event, and I sat next to someone who did some research in laser diagnostics, and it was just this great exchange, right?
Sure.
So anyway, a doctorate in mechanical engineering, and found the job that I had spent years trying to get, right, in educating myself here in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
With the U.S. Naval Research Lab. So I came from Indiana to D.C. To work for the Navy, basically doing research in engineering. And that's how I ended up in our great diocese here in Virginia.
Okay.
I started living in Alexandria, in Old Town, actually, for a few years. And then eventually I moved here closer to St. Louis, to the boundaries of St. Louis. So yeah, I've been on and off with this parish for the better part, I think, of 7 to 8 years. And it's been a great journey. The Lord has really blended that aspect of faith and reason for me.
Yeah.
You know, now, especially as I have concluded my time at the seminary, and I'm just a couple of weeks away from priesthood ordination. Yeah, I just can't wait to see what else the Lord has in store.
Absolutely. I do want to get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But you said some interesting things. You've really been all over.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I thought when you said St. Louis was your home parish, I thought maybe you'd been here since childhood. But no, 10 years old, that's a good chunk of childhood in a different country.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming Spanish first language.
That's right.
So you came here at 10. You had to learn English.
Yep.
So did they put you in special classes at school to maybe accelerate that process?
That's right. ESL was a big helper,
Yeah.
but then also this great Salesian sister who whenever we would have English class, she would sit with me separately in the cafeteria, and she would be very, very good at helping me with pronunciation. She would stress that so much, not just reading and comprehension, but really pronunciation. And I just thank her for that because, hardly people realize that I wasn't born in the U.S.
I was going to say, there's very little trace of an accent.
Yeah.
You seem like a native English speaker.
Yeah.
And like your vocabulary and like your diction or your syntax, I don't know if I'm using those words correctly.
Yeah.
But you seem very, very fluent.
Thank you. Well, it's all thanks to her, Sister Mary.
Did she speak Spanish or was she just...
She did not.
Wow. Okay.
No, German descent, all English, and somehow we did it. She did it.
I've heard stories of students that have a teacher that maybe they feel is too hard on them in the moment, but then they look back and they're like, oh man, they were hard on me because they cared so much.
Yeah.
So maybe...
Yeah.
I don't know if there was some of that.
I could see that. I don't know that I've ever felt like it was too hard, but she was definitely very strict about pronouncing things correctly. Oh. And I was pretty docile to that because I was just learning the language, so I felt like it might as well. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And then you said you brought up the path that maybe was presented for you, right? This path of engineering, get the good career, provide for your loved ones financially.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And I'm sure that was a big motivator for your parents to come here in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine that the choice between, I think, very obvious good and very obvious evil is very easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe when it becomes more nuanced where this is a good and this is a good.
Exactly.
Now what do you do?
That's exactly right.
So I wanted to maybe use this as our transition point. So you found a job here. What's going on in your head? What's going on in your soul? What are the things working inside you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, when I first arrived, I mean, just tremendous excitement, right? To be an engineer, to do research, to have fun with it, and to work at an elite institution, which is the U.S. Naval Research Lab. A privilege, really, and that was a good experience for me for a good 2-3 years that I worked there. I actually ended up working, I think, almost 4 years. But even just those first 2 years, I realized that somehow it wasn't going to be enough to satisfy me completely. Intellectually, I was very satisfied. But spiritually and emotionally, it just wasn't fully there. That, coupled with the fact that my mom passed away while I was in those first few years here, and my dad had already passed away years prior, right? And so that, with my mom passing away, really was a stimulus for me to reevaluate what the Lord was doing in my life. No longer was the goal of being able to provide for her, for my dad too, there, like that was gone. And so the Lord took advantage of that. Really, the Lord really opened a door of discernment for me because of that.
Yeah.
Right. It's a beautiful, it's something I can look back at now and consider it as a beautiful transition in my life, where, you know, the death of a loved one really transitions over into an opportunity to grow closer to the Lord.
Sure.
To have greater intimacy with him and to follow him more closely. And for me, that meant reevaluating this potential calling to the priesthood.
Yeah.
In an intimate, in a powerful way.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss. I didn't know that. But in a way, the Lord can bring beauty out of tragedy, like you said.
Yes.
So now you're reevaluating this call. Was it a specific moment, or maybe a culmination of moments that pushed you to sending in that application?
Yeah, it was a series of things. Several of them. I think one of them that's always fun for me to share is that I was living in a house nearby, actually, like less than 5 minutes away.
I know the house you're talking about.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah. Stony Brook?
Stony Brook, yes. Yeah. For those who don't know, our music director was your roommate at one point, right? Andrew Beatty.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And actually a previous employee too, Ryan Farrell.
Okay.
Yeah, Ryan Farrell also lived in that home. And in fact, Ryan is part of that story, is that the house was five rooms, 5 bedrooms, 5 of us men, Catholic, living our separate lives more or less, but always trying to live according to the Lord's will, the Lord's path. And so like exploring our vocations in one way or another, right? So it was a Catholic home by some regards. And Ryan Farrell moves in, and we start talking, and he shares with me that he's in the past discerned the priesthood, right?
Yeah.
And that he was interested in that. In fact, he did enter the seminary with me. But I remembered that conversation, and I remember telling him, "Oh, you're interested in the priesthood. That's great, but don't worry about it because it goes away." Referring to my own experience.
Sure.
In high school, I told him, "Don't worry about it, it goes away."
That's funny.
thinking it would be like some kind of comfort for him, right? But no, like in the end, very quickly, actually, within a couple of weeks, I found myself talking to him more and more about his journey, and joining him on some events, on some discernment events. And then the ball just kept rolling after that.
Sure.
And a year later, we both entered the seminary together. And so that's how the Lord works. It's full of surprises and really in unexpected ways, right? Mm-hmm. Like at no point did I imagine that a friend of mine, that's someone who would move into the house, a friend of mine, would all of a sudden invite me into his own discernment. Yeah. And then I would be captivated by it to the point where I would have my own discernment, right? Yeah. That was just one seed that the Lord planted in my path. Yeah. That's
so funny. It's amazing. Yeah. A lot of good came out of that house. I've heard stories of other houses of guys, and it's not as fruitful, let's say. Yeah. But wow. Don't worry, that feeling goes away. And I'm sure did he ever bring that up with you again? Like, no, I thought you said this would go away.
No, in fact, I don't think he remembers that.
Funny.
I've reminded him of it, but I don't think he remembers it. I remember it because it played such a role,
Yeah, I'm sure. Me. So now you're in seminary. How long is seminary now? How many years is it?
Yeah, it's if you've done college, if you have a college degree, it's 7 years. Okay. If you haven't done a college degree, then it's I believe it's 9. No, it might be 8. It might be 8. Okay. Yeah.
And the last year is the diaconate.
The last year is the diaconate, and now recently it's the first 6 months of that is at the seminary, if I'm not mistaken. So 1 semester basically, which is closer to 4 months, and then the following is your full diaconate time at a parish. Okay. Yeah.
And so where have you been this past, is it 6 months or is it?
Yeah, so for me, I'm part of the old system, which means that for the full year, I've been in the seminary as a deacon.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I've been at St. Charles Borromeo in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And so our diocese sends us seminarians to, I think, 3 seminaries at this point. Mm-hmm. 2 theology seminaries and 1 college. Okay. The college one is JP2, John Paul II, the second seminary in Washington, D.C. And then the two theology ones are Mount St. Mary's
Right.
in Emmitsburg,
Mm-hmm.
and then St. Charles in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia. Okay.
Yeah.
How was seminary?
Yeah. Well, you might be able to imagine as a 33-year-old, which is how old I was when I entered the seminary, having had, a career, sort of independence in how I spend my paycheck, living, on my own and then in a shared house. It was quite the transition over into a very disciplined life. And the life is obviously specifically disciplined to shape us, to form us into virtuous men, men of prayer, and then also men configured to the heart of Christ, right? It's sort of like a step-by-step process. But it begins with a disciplined day, a disciplined life. And that takes on in various forms. A wake-up time, more or less a bedtime as well, because you want to get up, right?
Yeah.
Time for prayer. And so those things were challenging at first because I was used to far more leniency, I guess, less discipline prior to that when it came to that. And then also not having a paycheck, that was a huge transition as well.
Sure.
I couldn't just go out to eat,
right?
As often as I could.
Back in the cafeteria.
Exactly. Yeah, back to the cafeteria. But then also back to dorm life, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're at 33 years old. It's like you're 19 again, maybe, going back to the dorm. But
yeah, I mean, certainly there's elements of that, right? And many of my classmates were much younger than me. Many of them came in at 22, at 23. I was entering at 33. And so there's also that added element of here I am living, praying, studying with men who are almost 10 years younger than me. So it has that aspect too, where like we sort of have to meet each other, in the middle at some point. So yeah, it almost felt like being back in college. It also, because of the class schedule, felt that way.
Sure.
So yeah, I would say it had its challenges for those reasons. But the thing too is that like it's at the same time it's different. Like it's also very different because in college everyone has their own agenda. Everyone is there to get a degree, to have fun, to enjoy being around each other. But then they have their own agenda afterward. At the seminary, our agenda really is growing closely to the Lord, learning how to pray, and discerning our vocations. And we are all unified by that.
Sure.
And so while it was different, it was also very similar in the more intimate aspects.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, I guess there are similarities in college, but like you said, everyone's going to go do their own thing. Yeah. We're like here, have a good time. This is a much more unified process, it seems.
Right. Yeah.
So you're done.
I am.
We
praise
are.
God.
Yeah. Praise God. We are 16 days away from the ordination.
That's right.
How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited, especially because I know my next assignment, my first assignment, which is St. William of York down in Stafford.
Yeah.
It's I can't wait to be there and to participate in the full life of the parish, the ministry. Yes, I'm also very much at peace because my discernment is over, and it really has been since my diaconate ordination. But this is just an affirmation of that. My discernment is over. There's no more really praying about it.
Sure.
I'm done with that part, and I'm happy to be like, I'm just happy to embrace what the Lord has in store for me. So yeah, I welcome it 100%.
That's awesome. When I was in college, I played a lot of gigs, and everyone thought I was going to go off and maybe move to New York and do music full time professionally, things like this. And I had a buddy who he said, I'm so jealous. Like you already know, like you know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I didn't, but it just seemed that way to my friends. Right. And so like you said, your discernment is over. So that's
Yeah.
That's beautiful in that maybe the questioning era has ended,
Yes.
but now it seems, I would say, like the real work will begin.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, as a veteran of the discernment process,
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who is discerning, either young or old, and maybe not necessarily a vocation, but I think that's an important part?
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe give some pointers or tips about what the process may look like? I know it might be specific to the individual, but are there any universals that maybe you could shine some light on?
Definitely. Yes. And what a good question to ask too, because discernment really should be part of everyone's life. We're all called to holiness. Every single one of us is called to sanctity, right? To be with the Lord in heaven. And so that is our primary vocation. But how that plays out in this life, in this side of heaven, that is an important aspect to discern. And so whether it's marriage or religious life or the priesthood, it really needs to be addressed at some point. I would say first, to trust that God has a plan, and it's not just any plan, but it's a good plan, a really good and satisfying plan, right? A plan that is going to encompass not just the person's skills and their desires, but really God's will as it manifests fully in that individual's life, right? It's a type of plan that brings the person really to life. I think when we try to grasp at different roles in our lives, we always end up dissatisfied because we're grasping maybe at fathoms or at idols or at ghosts of things that we think will be satisfying, but really won't be. And so to trust that God has a plan, that it's real, that it exists, that it's there, and that it's ultimately there to make us happy, I think that's the step number one, right? That needs to be our purpose. I guess maybe step two, right? If we're doing this in a series, pray. That needs to be at the foundation of every step we take in our discernment. If it's praying about marrying someone, then that prayer needs to really involve the Lord. It needs to bring the Lord into that relationship with that other. If it's praying about the priesthood or the religious life, likewise, right? Learning how to pray is part of the process, maybe step 3.
Yeah.
Learning how to pray. We all have a way of praying and maybe even a favorite way of prayer. Some of it may be meditation, maybe scriptural, maybe the rosary, maybe just some quiet time and adoration. Every one of those is a good way of prayer. And the Lord is always inviting us into deeper prayer and asking the Holy Spirit to help us, to teach us how to pray and how to grow deeper. I think that needs to be somewhere along the process, maybe step 3, I don't know. With those 3 things, none of us can go wrong. Those 3 things are always going to take us to Him who matters most.
Beautiful. Deacon, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for your wisdom and insights. I'll be praying for you. I'm sure the parishioners here at St. Louis will be praying for you as well.
Yeah, please do.
All right. Well, thank you again.
God bless. Thanks so much.